So I'm going to talk a little bit today on just good habits to get into for rank. This isn't so much a discussion of strategies for rank as it is just things for getting through the season, not burning yourself out, and making sure you're always playing your best. So the first thing that I do when I'm doing ranked is I queue unranked for one match before I queue ranked. And the primary purpose of this is a warm-up, but it's not so much just a warm-up, it's also a way to tell how well I'm playing on a given day, because people are not consistent, and this goes for all of us. Some days you'll play really well, some days you'll play horribly. It's all over the place, and most people have probably noticed this, where some days they're just in it, and some days they're just completely out of it. So it's always good to do an unranked match and to determine just how well you're going to be playing that day. Like, just the other day, I queued up into an unranked match, and I didn't do very well, and I didn't feel like I was doing very well. I didn't feel like I was noticing what I need to be noticing. I was not reading the map right. So I decided I'm not going to queue ranked this day, and that's just something that's good. That's called metacognition, is the technical term, basically diagnosing your mental state. And this is a very good habit to get into for any, not just gaming, but life in general. Just being able to determine, am I doing well or poorly, you know, what's my current mental state. Speaking of mental state, this is also a good way to tell on how alert you are too. And this does take some practice. Like, human beings aren't very good at determining or self-diagnosing their own mental state, but it's something you can teach yourself to do, and it's something that's very good to learn to do, particularly if you're trying to be competitive, because you need to know how well you're going to be playing at any given time. And since, you know, in ranked you want to be doing your best, you only want to be queuing when you're on your A game. And talking about mental state, another thing you need to be aware of is don't queue while tilted. Being angry does not help your game at all. So, like, if you're angry for any reason, don't queue. Like, don't read, like, an article on politics before queuing ranked. Like, trust me, it's not going to help you at all. If you get really salty after a match, don't queue right back up, because you're just going to feed that salt. One of the problems I see people doing is they'll get into a match, they'll lose, they'll get salty, they'll queue into another match, and they'll just be starting the second match already tilted, which just makes them play worse, which then makes them more likely to lose, and of course if they lose again, they'll just get more tilted, which just makes them play even worse, so they lose more, and this whole thing just snowballs, and they end up, at the end of the day, having lost a ton of rating and being absolutely angry at everything. Just don't. If you get really tilted after a match, stop. Don't keep queuing. Just stop. Take a break. Whatever you need to do to stop getting angry, and then continue. One strategy that I do is I will, between matches, actually look at, like, a webcomic, like XKCD's what I'll read a lot, or I'll go, like, Inspirobot, which is this fun web app that generates these silly things. Just something mildly amusing that will get your mind off whatever happened in the last match, so you're not bringing baggage from one match into the next match, because you want to be in the cleanest mental state you can be in. So looking at something like a webcomic between matches, take your minds off the last match, is a very good thing to be doing. The reason I recommend webcomics is because it is mentally impossible for a human being to be laughing at something, i.e. something funny in a comic, and be ticked at the same time. Like, anger and amusement can't go together. So the best way to stop being angry at the world or the matchmaking or the pugs or whatever is just go look at something funny between matches. And another thing to that is just don't binge queue, period. Like I mentioned earlier, people would just get into these chain losses and keep queuing and keep getting worse and worse from their tilted. Well, that's why you don't binge queue. Obviously, if you're on a win streak, you want to continue, but if you're losing like 2 matches in a row, even if you're not getting really tilted, you should probably stop. Because in my experience, things often come in streaks, and if you lose a few matches, you'll probably lose more matches. So just don't queue binges, particularly if you're losing. Now, if you're on like a roll, and you're feeling really good, and you're playing really well, and you're on a huge win streak, then yeah, you'll probably want to keep playing that day, and just play as much as you can while you're feeling good and are on top of your game. You know, don't throw away a good opportunity like that. But at the same time, if you're like not playing too well and you're losing, don't binge queue ever. And plus, the other thing with binge queuing is you'll burn out. Like I know so many players that have just gone ham on one season or another, just played tons of matches every day, and at the end of the season they just felt terrible and they were burned out and they just didn't want to PvP ever again. And that's obvious. Like, there's no game in the world that you will be able to play tons of matches every single day and not get burnout from it. Like, I'm sorry. That's just never going to happen. You always need to do things in moderation so you don't burn yourself out. Don't kill yourself playing ranked, please. And that's something that I do, is like, I will put this game down. Like, I love Guild Wars 2, but I will go several days where I won't play Guild Wars 2. I'll do something else. I'll do like Arma or something, or play some other game, do some modding, you know, other low stress things, and then I'll get on Guild Wars and be competitive for a little bit, and then I'll take a break so I don't burn out, because you don't want to burn yourself out at any point. So, and then another thing, and I'm going to change my tack a little bit from just queuing practices, is actual things you should be doing to just improve your game in general. So the first thing I'm going to say is audio and music. A lot of people will like to play with like music in the background, or worse, they'll just have like only music and they'll have the game sounds turned off. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. There are only two senses that you use while playing Guild Wars 2. Sight and hearing. All of the information about what's going on in the game is coming in through your eyes and your ears. So having something in the like music that's drowning out the game, or worse, you have the game audio turned off, you're cutting off an entire sense there, and that's going to really hurt your game. It's also worth noting that the human brain processes audio cues faster than it processes visual cues. Like a lot of times when I dodge things like thieves and their alpha attacks or something, it's because I heard the clicking noise of a thief's dagger coming out, not because I saw the thief. And another thing about sounds is they're not limited by your camera angle, so if there's someone like coming up behind you, you can hear them if they're casting some attack, because most of the attacks in the game have distinctive audio cues. Now, a lot of the core classes, like the vanilla abilities and stuff, they had a lot of repetitive audio cues, but all of the new elite specs, including the hot ones and the ones coming up with Path of Fire, all have distinctive audio cues, and you can really use those. In some of my videos, I've hit people with like unexpected gravediggers, where like I'll be off hitting something over here, and then I'll turn around and gravedigger at someone over here, and I'll hit them, even though they probably had the tools to avoid that. And a lot of the reason that happens is they're not listening, because they'll be paying attention to someone else. Like, let's say their eyes will be down at the map, looking to see where people are, so they won't necessarily see that I've changed direction, I'm now slightly raised, because their eyes are over here, or maybe they're up here looking at, you know, health bars, or maybe they're looking at whoever they've got targeted spoon bar. They don't see that. But if they would be listening, they would hear the distinctive audio cue of the Gravedigger cast and would be able to react to it, even though they weren't looking at it. And this isn't just for things like Gravedigger. Anything in the game with a deterministic audio cue, you can use like that. Like a lot of times, like a Rev will be casting their Glint Elite, but they'll be casting it behind me where I can't see them, but I'll hear them and I'll still be able to dodge roll it. And it's also very important for certain weapon skills, because a lot of weapons don't have very flashy animations, particularly older ones. Like, for instance, comparing Necromancer Axe. Like, what is the Necro Axe? It is basically a 2-foot-long stick with a thing on the end. What is a scepter? It's a 2-foot-long stick with a thing on the end. You know, if you're in a big team fight, those look the same. So, like, if I'm going into a mid-fight on a new match, I don't know what the other team's Necromancer's playing, and I go into the mid-fight, there's particle effects everywhere, I can't really see. I could still be able to tell what spec that Necro has just from listening for the sound of an axe attack or that wooden noise that the scepter makes. And that can be really important, because just hearing that and being like, okay, he's got this weapon, I can then start looking for other tells and audio cues, and I can basically pick apart what that guy's build is without ever actually looking at the Necro or focusing on him. I can just listen and be like, okay, he has this weapon and he's using these utilities, so he's probably running this build. So like if I'm in a fight and I hear a Necro use an axe skill, I know he's got an axe. I can assume he's running a power build, because axe is just pretty much never seen a zombie build. And if I see, say, he puts down a well, so I know he has an axe and a well, and then I can immediately determine that, okay, since he's running an axe and a well, he probably has blood magic, which means his build options are going to probably look like either blood spite or blood soul reaping, most likely blood soul reaping, and then I can immediately start making inferences on what his capabilities are and what I need to be looking for. And I did that just from seeing, oh, there's a well and I heard an axe. It's not even looking at his boom bar or his buffs or whatever. And on some classes, looking at them just doesn't even tell you anything. Thieves are a good example of this, because they pretty much all use the same signets, and unless they have venoms up, you can't really tell the difference. Like, you can't tell the difference just looking at a sword dagger thief and tell the difference between a Condi and power variant. Because it's the same weapon set, it's all the same animations. But if you hear the click of the caltrops falling to the ground when they dodge, you can be like, okay, that's a Condi thief, because they're dropping caltrops. So again, that's why audio cues are so important, is just hearing those things and being able to tell, I'm hearing this, so they're using that. You know, hearing shouts is something. Now, some people have attested to listening to music, you know, helps them focus or whatever. And you know, there's been some studies that suggest that. But you just want to make sure that that music's in the background and that it's not drowning out any of the audio cues. And some of the audio cues in this game can be quite subtle, so you need to definitely make sure that you're not missing anything, because you don't want to be wasting any of your auditory input, because this game has a ton of visual noise. Like, there's so many things you need to be looking at. You need to be looking at your map, you need to be looking at all the people, you need to be looking at particle effects on the ground, you need to be looking at your Condi bar, you need to be looking at your team's health bar up here. There's so many things you need to be looking at, and you can't look at them all at once, which means you need to make sure that you're getting as much information out of your other sense, which is your ears, as you can, because you're not going to be able to see everything all the time with your eyes. Also, if you are one of those people that just insists on listening to music because it helps you focus or whatever, don't listen to music with lyrics, because anything with spoken word in it, your brain subconsciously has to decipher that spoken word. Like, your brain identifies that, hey, this thing is communicating to me, I need to spend mental capacity to understand what's being said. Even if you're not consciously doing it, a part of your brain's working on that problem, and that's actually detracting from the amount of brain power, I guess, you can spend on the game. You've probably noticed, for those of you that's been watching a ton of my videos, that when I'm duo queuing with someone that I have in a voice chat, I don't narrate as much. Like, when I'm solo queuing, I'm talking all the time. I'm just narrating all the time to you, the listeners. But when I'm queuing with someone and talking in voice chat, I don't do that. Or if I do, it's not as much. And the reason for that is because I'm already spending mental resources having this conversation in voice chat with another person. I don't want to spend any other unnecessary mental resources doing something like narrating. Because, again, I want to keep as much of my head on the game as possible. But really, I just don't recommend using music at all. So moving on, another thing is caffeine. It's been shown in a ton of studies that caffeine improves your reaction time. So drinking your coffee before queuing is probably a good idea. Except there. Or tea, whatever floats your boat. Soda works too, although I will point out that soda's basically acid as far as your system. Drinking a ton of those isn't exactly the greatest thing for your health. Or your teeth, just ask my dentist. I have 14 cavities right now because that I've been chugging in the past seasons. Gone. Don't queue while drowsy or sleepy. You know, if you're super tired, you probably won't. Again, that kind of goes back to my original point of just be cognizant of your mental state and how alert you are. Another thing for just keeping your sanity during the season is don't take your rating too seriously. Obviously, you know, you want to have a good rating. And it's good to care about improving your rating. But I see so many people that just constantly get just ticked off, tilted, frustrated, etc. because they lost some rating in a match. The thing to remember is all the rating systems, and this isn't just the one in Guild Wars, this is basically every rating system in existence, work based on having more data. And a lot of that comes from looking at data big picture rather than at individual matches. Which means over the course of the season your rating will get accurate, but you will swing around, which means you'll have points where you'll swing really high and then your rating will swing down again. Just because it's swinging down doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You'll get it back. Unless, of course, you just swung way too high and just are way out of your skill level, at which point, yeah, you're going to have a losing streak and you're probably never going to make that back up. But that's fine. That's what the matchmaker's supposed to be doing. The purpose or not the matchmaker, that's what the rating system's supposed to be doing. The purpose of Glicko is to assign you a rating that is indicative of your skill level. It is to rank your skill level. It is not a progression system, and people need to not treat it like one, because if you try and treat it like a progression system, you're just going to end up very, very frustrated. And in a similar vein, don't take your placements too seriously. I see a lot of people freaking out over where they get placed. The thing about placements aren't special. All the placements are is your first 10 games. That's it. The matchmaking algorithm and the Glicko algorithm, which is the system that assigns your rating, work exactly the same for your first 10 matches as they do for any other match in the season. There's nothing special about placement. The reason they have placement though, and the reason your rating's hidden during placement is Glicko has this thing called volatility, where your rating moves around a lot during the beginning of the season because the matchmaker isn't very sure about where you need to put. And since during the first 10 games you're under extremely high volatility, developers in such systems such as ArenaNet will cover up the first early matches so that they don't have players freaking out about getting, you know, plus 30, minus 40, etc. matches. Because again, those first 10 matches are weighted really heavily. Like, I think the first match you play when you do placements in a season is like a 90-point match, maybe even more. And of course, a lot of you are probably like, well, that's unfair because it means I have all this weight being placed on these early matches. Yeah, it is a little bit unfair. It is guesswork at the beginning. Again, placement, it's just going to put you somewhere that the matchmaker thinks is approximately correct. And it could be completely wrong. But if it is wrong, and you keep playing during the season, you'll eventually get to where you need to be. For instance, in Season 5, I placed 900 rating. That's deep bronze. 900 rating is the bottom of the barrel, particularly in Season 5, which had more inflated ratings than later seasons because of how the volatility worked in that season. So being placed at 900 was really bad. Like, it was worse than being placed at 900 now. But I ended that season over 1,500 rating. Because again, the matchmaker fixed itself. I didn't get placed well, but everything fixed itself in the end because the matchmaker got more data from my later matches. Not the matchmaker, Glicko. Anytime in this video where I say matchmaker, just replace that with Glicko. Those terms aren't interchangeable, and that misspeak on my part. Continuing on, the time of day you're queuing is also important. Obviously, like I said earlier, don't queue while tired, so, you know, if there's a time of day where you're more alert than others, that'd be a good time to queue. Obviously, if you're, you know, working a day job, you obviously can't be queuing then, but do the best you can. Another thing is different times of day will have different demographics of players depending on what time zones, and you can get very different results depending on when you're queuing. I generally avoid doing ranked on the weekends because I've never had a good experience with ranked on the weekends. So I usually only queue on weekdays. The time I've been queuing during this season, it's usually been around noon Eastern because that's a time block that's available to me between classes. I usually get fairly consistent match quality during that time block. And it's early in the day, so I'm alert. I'm not getting tired like I am in the evening, so I play the best at that point in time. So that's what works for me. It's going to be different for every person, but you just need to figure out what's the best times to be queuing for me to get the best results. Another thing for keeping your sanity is don't be afraid to queue dodge. I know a lot of people like to cast queue dodging as taboo or bad or something. And if you're like a chronic queue dodger where you're just trying to queue dodge everyone or something, or just anyone that's like remotely decent or whatever, then yeah, that's not a good habit. But if there's like someone that's been in your match twice in a row that like always AFKs or something, wait, don't just queue up again. Wait for them to get in the match, because you don't want to be getting perpetually stuck in the match with someone that AFKs or someone that's always ranting or whatever. Just save yourself the frustration, queue dodge them, and just don't deal with that. Because it's just, at the end of the day, if you keep getting queued up with someone like that, you're just going to be super tilted at the end of all of it. Now, I don't advocate queue dodging other good players, because I always advocate, you know, testing yourself against good players. I love matches against high-level players, because, you know, those are some of the best learning experiences. But, you know, when it comes to avoiding obviously frustrating things like AFKers, trolls, players playing full raid meta Condi Ranger, i.e. an entire PvE build with no defenses, you know, those kind of frustrating things. Yeah, just avoid those people. Save yourself some pain. I think that's about everything. What else I was forgetting? Oh, yes. Don't queue on classes you don't have a lot of experience on. There's been a lot of people I've seen have been trying to argue that everyone should multi-class. No, this is wrong. Classes in Guild Wars are not things that are easy to pick up. I know a lot of people said the classes are simple, and maybe mechanically a lot of them are. Necro's certainly not a complicated class mechanically, that's for sure. But the thing is, Guild Wars is a very fast-paced game, which means you need to be able to react. You need to be able to do things off muscle memory, which means you need to be extremely familiar with the class you're playing, and being that familiar requires a lot of experience with the class and build. Like, one of the reasons that pretty much all of the builds that I use are Great Sword Axe is because I have so much muscle memory on that weapon combo that I can just instinctively use these tools. I don't have to think about what weapon skills I'm using. I can just use them instinctively. Whereas if I was multi-classing or playing a ton of different builds, you know, I wouldn't have that muscle memory. And well, yeah, if you're some player that can play, you know, 15 hours a day, then yeah, you could probably pick up a couple of classes because you've got enough time devoted to the game that you could get the muscle memory necessary to be competitive on multiple classes. But if you're, a more typical player in terms of your playtime, i.e. you have other responsibilities and don't make your living playing this game, you're not going to have enough playtime to really be learning a lot of classes, which means multi-classing, i.e. playing a bunch of different classes in ranked, is probably going to be detrimental to you. And if you're a super competitive player that's trying to, be an absolute top player, you definitely don't want to multi-class. If you look at all the ESL players, they don't multi-class. Syndrider, he only plays a thief. And not only does he only play a thief, he only plays a DP Daredevil thief. He doesn't even play Condi thief. It's only Power thief. Syndrider, or not Syndrider, Helsith, he only plays Mesmer. Nos, he only plays Necromancer. Poker only plays Rev and Thief. All of the super top players, they only play one class. And there's a reason for that. And that's because if you want to play at the absolute best, you need to make sure that you've devoted everything to perfecting playing one class rather than being mediocre at several classes. I know a lot of people have been pushing that, well, if they're running this comp, you should swap your classes out, match the enemy comp or counter it. And yeah, sure, countering the enemy comp can be a huge advantage, but if the players on your classes aren't good at that class, if they're mediocre, that's not that big of an advantage. Having an exceptional player that can play a class exceptionally, even if it's not necessarily the best class for the situation, is better than having a person playing the optimal class for the situation, but playing that class at a mediocre or even bad level. So it is very important that you pick something and you stick to it. That's why I only play Necro. I used to multi-class a lot, just look at this wheel, but then I fixed on Necromancer because it was the class I enjoyed the most. It's the class that I felt the most comfortable on, so I decided I'm just going to devote everything to this class. So that's what I did. That's about all I was going to talk about. Oh, one other thing, since I brought up this wheel, you probably noticed that I only have a fairly low amount of games played at 2,300, which is pretty low for a lot of the serious PvPers. I'm actually going to let you all in on a secret. I haven't been playing this game as long as most of y'all probably been. I actually started this game with the free-to-play option right before Heart of Thorns. That's when I'd never played the game prior to that. And that's also one of the reasons why I ended up single maining, is because since I started playing so recently compared to so many other players, I didn't have all of the hundreds of hours of experience that a lot of the older players have. So in order to make up for that, I specialized on one class, which is Necromancer, in order to try and catch up as quickly as possible, because by devoting all of my playtime to one class, rather than splitting my learning among multiple classes, I can catch up on this one class a lot faster than it would be if I was trying to multi-main competitively. Because again, I just don't have the playtime of other players, so I can't multi-main and expect to end up playing anywhere near as good as top players. So by devoting all of my time and effort into one class, I could catch up and be competitive much faster than what I would be normally. Because normally, if you're joining a game 3 years late, you're never going to be a top player. And you know what? I'm still not really a top player. There's way better Necromancers out there than me. But I'm getting there. I'm in Platinum. I reach Platinum every season, even while still queuing, so I've definitely come a long way. And the 2 short years I've been playing this game compared to the 5 years a lot of the other Platinum players are playing, I've been playing for. Alright, so I'm actually going to end the video now.